The night my world shifted began with the sound of laughter and the clinking of champagne glasses, a sound I had always associated with comfort, but that evening it echoed in my ears like a warning bell. My name is Eliza Carter, and I was 32 years old when I stepped into my parents' towering glass home, never imagining that my life was about to fracture under the weight of their expectations. The home sat high above the city, marble floors shining like mirrors and windows that stretched from ceiling to floor, offering a view of Atlanta's glittering skyline. I remember thinking the place felt less like a home and more like a monument to wealth and appearances, a carefully constructed stage where every performance had to be perfect. And tonight, the performance was my sister's birthday party, a celebration for her 35th year of life, though she still lived like a teenager, jobless and carefree. I walked in holding 2 bottles of vintage wine I had purchased with my own money. Wine I thought would impress the guests, wine that had cost me over $300 for the collection. I had also quietly contributed to the private chef who stood in the corner, preparing dishes that gleamed under the chandeliers. My total contribution that night had been nearly $1,000, and yet when I entered, no one acknowledged me. My mother brushed past as if I were one of the hired servers, her focus fixed on rearranging the dessert table. I tried not to let the sting of her indifference seep too deep, but it lingered in the back of my chest like a dull ache. Across the room, my sister, Clara, glided in like a queen, her gown sparkling under the lights, her laughter ringing louder than the quartet playing in the background. She basked in the adoration of relatives and family friends, all of whom treated her as if she had already conquered the world, though she had never held a steady job in her life. The conversation swirled around me, each one a jab at my choices. An aunt leaned in close and asked if my career in technology really made me happy, as though happiness could only come from the approval of others. My uncle raised his glass with a smirk, whispering that I was too busy chasing money to ever build a family of my own. Even a cousin barely younger than me found a way to smirk and question whether my independence had left me empty. Their words piled on me like heavy stones, but I stood still, my smile frozen in place, determined not to let them see how deeply each cut landed. I searched for any flicker of gratitude from Clara, hoping she might at least recognize the sacrifices I had made for this evening, the chef, the wine, the hours I had spent helping my mother prepare. But her eyes passed over me as though I were invisible. When she caught my gaze, she quickly looked away, her lips curving into the sort of smile meant for her admirers, not for me. I whispered under my breath, "You are welcome," for the wine, knowing she would never hear, and poured myself a glass to numb the tightness growing in my chest. Around me, the conversations continued, each one somehow circling back to my sister's charm, her free spirit, her ability to light up the room. Meanwhile, I, the younger sister who had climbed to the top of my field and earned every square foot of my own penthouse through years of sleepless nights, was treated like an outsider. Still, I stayed. I stayed because part of me still wanted to belong, still wanted to feel like family despite the coldness that had trailed me since childhood. I moved through the crowd, shaking hands, nodding at stories I did not care about, laughing at jokes that were not funny. I watched as my father raised a glass, his voice booming across the hall, praising Clara for her beauty and grace, words he had never once spoken to me. And as the candles were lit and the cake was prepared, I felt my heart sink, heavy with the weight of what I already knew but tried to deny. No matter what I achieved, I would never be enough in their eyes. I told myself to endure the evening, to keep the peace. I had no idea that before the night ended, keeping the peace would become impossible, and the facade of family loyalty would shatter beyond repair. The quartet's music faded mid-note when my father stood again, this time not with a toast but with a theatrical smile that stretched too wide across his face. The microphone in his hand gleamed under the chandelier, and for a moment I thought he was about to make another grand announcement about Clara, some long-winded speech about her charm or her grace. Instead, his booming voice carried across the room and froze me where I stood. "Tonight," he said, "our generous Eliza is making the ultimate sacrifice. She is giving her beautiful penthouse to her sister, so Clara can finally start fresh." His words hit me like a fist to the stomach, knocking the breath out of me. The 30 or so guests gasped. Some clapped as though my father had just announced a donation to charity, not the theft of my hard-earned home. My heart pounded as the weight of their expectant stares bore down on me. My penthouse, worth millions, The space I had built with every sleepless night and every pitch meeting had been offered up like a party favor. Clara's hands flew to her chest in a dramatic gesture, her eyes glistening with feigned surprise. "Oh, Father, really?" she whispered, though I caught the flicker in her eyes, that tiny upward twitch of her lips that told me she had known this was coming all along. I stood frozen, my wineglass trembling in my hand, the red liquid dangerously close to spilling over the rim. The room waited for me to smile and nod, to play the role of the selfless sister who gave everything while asking for nothing. My father pressed on, his tone patronizing, his words slicing through the quiet. "Clara has been struggling," he said, "jobless for so long. Family must step up, right, Eliza?" Around us, heads nodded in unison, the murmur of agreement growing louder. My mother chimed in, her voice soft but pointed, as though trying to hide her claws beneath silk. "Eliza, you have done so well for yourself. Sharing with your sister is the least you can do." My chest tightened. Aunt Miriam leaned forward with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "It's such a beautiful gesture, dear. Don't be selfish." My uncle gave a gruff nod, adding, "Family first, Eliza. You don't need that big place all alone." Their words piled on top of one another, pressing against my chest until it felt like I could not breathe. I looked at Clara's fiancé, Evan, searching for even a shred of decency, but he avoided my gaze and took a long sip of his drink. The room closed in, suffocating. I placed my glass down with deliberate calm, though rage swirled beneath the surface. My voice cut through the noise, sharper than I intended. "No." The room went silent. Applause faltered mid-clap. My father's smile twisted into something dark, his jaw tightening. "What did you say?" His tone carried the warning of a storm about to break. I straightened, my shoulders square, and met his eyes. "I am not giving up my home. I worked for it. Every late night, every sleepless hour, every pitch, every contract, that home is mine." Clara's struggles are not my burden. Clara's face crumpled in a display of hurt, but I saw through it. There was no pain in her expression, only calculation. Her teary eyes were as rehearsed as her gasp had been. My mother's voice rose sharply, cutting into the air like a whip. "How can you say that? Your sister needs help." Aunt Miriam clutched her necklace, as though my words had offended her very soul. "That is so cold," she announced, making sure the entire room could hear. My uncle muttered ungrateful under his breath. The whispers began, each one carrying judgment. A family friend leaned toward her husband and hissed, "She has always been too independent." Another added, "Poor Clara, stuck with a sister like that." Their whispers cut like knives, but I refused to bend. I lifted my chin and forced my voice to stay steady. "I have supported this family," I reminded them, louder now. "I paid for half of this party, the wine, the chef, everything. But my home is not up for grabs." The room shifted, the judgment turning sharper, more suffocating. My father's grip on the microphone tightened, his knuckles white. Clara dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, pretending to cry, but I caught the faint curve of her lips. She was playing her part, letting them see me as the cruel sister, the selfish one. My mother hissed at me under her breath. "You are embarrassing us." But I did not flinch. I had spent years working for recognition they never gave, years bending to their expectations, only to be told I was never enough. Tonight, I drew a line in the sand. The air was electric, buzzing with the weight of what had just happened. A few guests pulled out their phones, their screens glowing as they hovered, ready to capture the fallout. My heart pounded, but for the first time all evening, I felt something close to freedom. I was not bending, not this time. My father's eyes narrowed to slits, and I braced myself for the storm. The storm came faster than I could have prepared for. My father's face twisted with rage, the warmth of his earlier performance gone in an instant. "You are defying me," he barked, his voice booming so loudly that the walls seemed to vibrate. The microphone trembled in his hand as he stepped closer, towering over me like a shadow I had spent my life trying to escape. I wanted to respond, to remind him that I was no longer a little girl waiting for his approval, but before the words could leave my mouth, his hand swung. The crack of his palm against my cheek sliced through the silence like a whip. Pain shot through me, white-hot and stunning, my head snapping to the side. The pearl earring I had chosen so carefully for the evening flew off, skittering across the marble floor until it glinted under the chandelier. A chorus of gasps filled the room. 30 guests stood frozen, their judgmental whispers replaced with horrified silence. I pressed my hand against the burning skin of my cheek, the heat spreading beneath my fingers, but I refused to let a single tear fall. Across the room, a young man, one of Evan's friends, fumbled with his phone. The red glow of a recording light blinked on, and I realized the moment was already being captured. "This is unreal," he muttered, his voice low, as he angled the camera toward me. Others whispered furiously, their voices muffled but unmistakable. Some gasped in shock. Others leaned in, eager to witness the unraveling of the Carter family live. Clara pressed her hand to her mouth, but behind the mask of faux horror, I caught it again, the flicker of satisfaction. My mother rushed forward, her voice sharp and trembling. "Eliza, apologize to your father," she demanded, as if I were the one who had crossed the line. Her words hit harder than the slap, a betrayal so sharp it left me breathless. I ignored her, my eyes fixed on the small pearl lying near a table leg. I bent down slowly, my knees steady, and picked it up. The cool surface of the jewel felt grounding in my palm. I straightened, my voice calm but deliberate as I turned to face Clara. "Happy birthday," I said, the words cutting through the tense air. The crowd parted as I walked toward the door. Their whispers followed me, like a wave of judgment crashing behind me. "She is walking out," someone hissed. "She cannot do that," another replied. But I did not look back. The heavy door clicked shut behind me, sealing their chaos away. The marble wall was cold against my back as I leaned against it, my hand still pressed to my cheek. My heart raced, but there was clarity in the pounding. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling, and dialed the one person who had never failed me. Kayla answered on the first ring. "Eliza, are you okay?" Her voice was sharp with worry. I closed my eyes, swallowing the sting of tears I had refused to show them. "Dad slapped me," I whispered, my voice flat but shaking. "He demanded that I give Clara my penthouse, and when I refused—" "He hit you?" Kayla snapped, her voice rising with fury. "In front of everyone?" I nodded even though she could not see me, recounting the public demand. Clara's fake tears, my mother's accusations, the guests' judgment. Each word tumbled out of me like shards of glass. Kayla's silence stretched for a moment, thick with anger, before she spoke. "You don't deserve this. You have carried that family for years, and this is how they repay you." Her words anchored me, each one a reminder of the truth I had tried to ignore. She paused, then added, "Call Margaret, your grandmother will shut this down." Her suggestion sent a spark of resolve through me. Grandma Margaret, 80 years old, still sharp, still fierce, the matriarch who held the family's financial strings with iron fists. She had always seen me for who I was, unclouded by favoritism or false praise. "Do it, Eliza," Kayla urged. "She will back you." I scrolled through my contacts until I reached Margaret's number. My thumb hovered over the screen, my chest tight with nerves and anticipation. Finally, I pressed call. The line rang once, twice, then clicked. "Eliza," her voice was steady, expectant, as though she already knew something had gone terribly wrong. I took a breath, ready to tell her everything. 30 minutes later, the heavy doors to the penthouse swung open with a force that silenced the room in an instant. Margaret Carter entered like a storm wrapped in silver. At 80 years old, she still carried herself like a queen, her cane tapping against the marble floor in a rhythm that demanded attention. Every conversation, every whisper, every lingering chuckle from the party died the moment her eyes swept across the crowd. I stood at the back, my cheeks still throbbing where my father's hand had landed, watching as my grandmother's presence swallowed the noise and replaced it with awe. "Daniel," she said, her voice low but edged with steel, "explain why you dared to lay a hand on my granddaughter." My father's face drained of color, the microphone nearly slipping from his grip. His usual confidence evaporated, replaced by a stiffness that revealed the fear he tried to hide. The room held its breath, guests leaning forward, desperate to catch every word. Margaret did not wait for an answer. She raised her cane, the polished tip pointing toward the floor. "You have 5 minutes to find the earring you knocked loose. If not, I will handle this myself." A ripple of panic moved through the guests. Clara dropped to her knees without hesitation, scrambling across the floor, her designer dress dragging across the marble as she searched. My mother clutched my father's arm, her eyes wide with desperation. "Mother, please," she stammered, but Margaret lifted her hand and silenced her instantly. Aunt Miriam and Uncle George stood frozen, their earlier smugness gone, replaced with pale unease. I remained silent, my heart steady yet heavy, as I realized Margaret was not only defending me but preparing to expose years of buried truths. She turned her gaze on the crowd, her voice rising with a power that cut through the air. "Eliza is the only one I trust. She built her life with her own hands, with no excuses and no handouts, unlike some of you." Her eyes locked on my father, then my mother, and finally Clara, who froze mid-search, her face twisting under the weight of the accusation. "Daniel," she continued, "you run a company but cannot run your family with fairness. Susan, you coddled Clara into uselessness. And Clara," her voice dropped lower, "sharper, you have taken enough from your sister." Gasps echoed across the room. Phones lifted as more guests began recording, eager to capture every moment of the spectacle unraveling before them. Margaret stepped forward, her cane tapping with deliberate rhythm. "I have made my decision," she declared, her gaze brushing over me before landing on my father. "I am rewriting my will. Everything, my estate, my investments, my properties, will go to Eliza." The room erupted into chaos. My mother let out a strangled cry, her hands flying to her mouth. "You cannot!" she screamed, her voice cracking as though she could will the words away. Clara collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably, her tears no longer calculated but desperate. My father stood rigid, his jaw clenched so tight I thought it might shatter, while Aunt Miriam whispered, "This is outrageous," to Uncle George, who nodded, his face pale as stone. The quartet that had been playing earlier stood frozen in the corner, instruments limp in their hands. I stayed quiet, my hands clasped tightly, absorbing the weight of Margaret's words. She was not only protecting me, she was tearing down decades of lies that had painted me as selfish, unworthy, cold. Our eyes met, and she gave me the faintest nod, her pride sharp and clear. Clara's sobs grew louder. "Grandma, please," she begged, her voice cracking. "I did not mean for this." Margaret's expression did not soften. "You meant every bit of it," she replied coldly. "You knew your father's plan, and let it happen." My father tried to step forward, his voice trembling. "Mother, you are overreacting. Eliza is strong. She will be fine." Margaret's eyes narrowed, her words cutting him like a blade. "Strong because she had to be, no thanks to you." My mother tried once more, her tone pleading. "We are a family, Mother. Do not tear us apart." But Margaret turned away, her cane striking firmly against the floor as she walked toward me. The 5 minutes passed, but no one found the earring. It rested in my pocket, and Margaret never asked. She knew. "This family has failed," she declared, her voice echoing through the hall. "You shamed her, used her, and even struck her. No more." Guests shifted uneasily, some averting their eyes, others still recording, their screens glowing with proof that the Carter family's perfect facade had shattered. I stood still, my chest tight but my resolve unshaken. Margaret's words were my shield. Her decision, my lifeline. That night, as I sat alone in my penthouse, the city lights of Atlanta twinkling like tiny fires against the glass walls, my phone would not stop buzzing. Notifications poured in, a constant stream of alerts that turned my living room into the nerve center of a scandal unraveling in real time. The live stream from Clara's party had gone viral, spreading across platforms like wildfire. Clips of my father's slap, my refusal to surrender my home, and my grandmother's thunderous declaration were replayed again and again, dissected by strangers who had no stake in my life but could not look away. "Disgusting behavior," one comment read beneath a video clip. "Eliza deserves better," another posted. Thousands of views grew into tens of thousands, each share amplifying the outrage. People who had never met me were now rallying behind me, their voices forming a chorus of support I had never felt within my own family. For once, the world saw what I had endured: the favoritism, the cruelty, the demand that I sacrifice myself for someone else's comfort. My phone pinged again, this time with a message from a mutual friend. "Evan's family is reconsidering the wedding," the text read. "They are worried about Clara's baggage. The drama is too much. I stared at the screen, my chest tight. Clara's engagement, her one fragile anchor in a life otherwise sheltered by my parents' constant handouts, was slipping through her fingers. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of pity, but it vanished as quickly as it came. She had stood by while my father humiliated me, her silence as damning as his slap. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent, dragging me from my thoughts. I opened the door to find my father and mother standing there, their faces drawn and hollow. My father's shoulders sagged in a way I had never seen before, his confidence stripped bare. "Eliza, we need to talk," he said, his voice low. My mother's eyes were red, her hands clasped tightly as though holding herself together. "We are sorry," she added, her tone pleading. The pressure to support Clara, it got out of hand. I crossed my arms, my jaw tight. Their words sounded rehearsed, hollow, a desperate attempt to repair something they had shattered beyond repair. "You think an apology fixes this?" I asked, my voice steady but cold. "You demanded my home. You struck me in front of everyone." My father flinched, the memory etched into his face, but my mother pressed forward, her eyes wet. "We are family, Eliza. We made a mistake." I shook my head, the weight of years pressing against me. "Your mistake cost me my trust," I said firmly. "You chose Clara over me again and again. I am done." My father's face hardened, but he did not argue. My mother reached out her hand, trembling, but I stepped back before she could touch me. "Please, Eliza," she whispered, her voice cracking. I closed the door, their silhouettes fading behind the frosted glass. My heart pounded, but for the first time, I felt lighter. The weight I had carried for years slipped from my shoulders as the lock clicked into place. I was no longer their pawn. An hour later, Kayla arrived, her expression fierce as she wrapped me in a hug. "You did the right thing," she said, settling onto my couch. "They do not get to walk back what they did." I nodded, pouring us both coffee as I showed her the flood of online posts. "The internet is tearing them apart," I murmured. Kayla scanned the comments, her lips curving into a small, satisfied smile. "Good," she said. "Let them face the consequences." She set her phone down and looked at me, her eyes steady. "You are stronger than they will ever be, Eliza. Cut them off for good." Her words sank into me, sealing the decision I had been building toward all night. I had spent my entire life seeking their approval, begging for scraps of respect that never came, but no more. My phone chimed again, this time with an email notification. The sender's name made my breath catch. Grandma Margaret. I opened it quickly, my eyes scanning the words that anchored me more than anything else could have. "My decision stands," it read. "The will is being redrafted, naming you as my sole heir. You have proven your worth not just to me, but to yourself. Stay strong." I read the message twice, my chest swelling with a mixture of relief and resolve. Margaret's trust was more than financial, it was validation, a lifeline I had needed for so long. Kayla squeezed my hand, her smile warm. "She has your back," she said softly. I nodded, my eyes stinging, but my heart firm. The family I had clung to for so long was gone, but I was ready to move forward without them. That night, for the first time in years, I felt a quiet peace settle over me. I had chosen myself. 3 months later, I stood at the window of my penthouse, the skyline of Atlanta stretching wide and luminous before me. The city pulsed with light and life, each flicker a reminder of what I had built through grit and sleepless nights. My reflection in the glass no longer looked like the woman who had walked into Clara's birthday party weighed down by her family's judgment. This woman was sharper, steadier, unshackled from the need for approval that had once chained her. In those months, my life had shifted in ways I had never expected. At work, I had been promoted to Chief Technology Officer, my name etched into a glass award for innovation in artificial intelligence. The ceremony was crowded, colleagues cheering as I accepted the honor. My heart swelled with a pride I had been denied for so long at home. I remembered the nights of coding until dawn, the pitches that landed million-dollar contracts, the endless pressure I had carried alone. And now, finally, the recognition was mine, earned without compromise. News of my family's downfall trickled to me through mutual contacts and whispers that seemed to circulate like smoke. Clara's engagement collapsed not long after the party. Evan and his family quietly stepping away from the chaos. They wanted no part of the scandal, no part of the baggage that came with a family publicly disgraced. The viral footage had painted the Carters as toxic, a dynasty undone by arrogance and cruelty. My father's business, once thriving, began to falter as clients pulled back, unwilling to be associated with a man whose violence and manipulation had become headlines. My mother's social circle dwindled. The charity events she once hosted with grandeur now struggled to draw even a handful of guests. They were unraveling, thread by thread, while I stood apart, no longer bound to their collapse. And yet, I felt no joy in their ruin. There was no triumph in watching them stumble, only a quiet acceptance that their choices, not mine, had led them here. I had severed all ties, no calls, no texts, no reconciliation. The night I closed the door on their apology had been the last time I heard their voices. I blocked their numbers and deleted their messages. My resolve held firm, a line no plea or excuse could cross. Kayla became my anchor in those months, her presence filling the spaces where family had once been. She visited weekly, her laughter brightening my home as we planned trips, debated the latest trends in technology, or simply sat in comfortable silence. My colleagues, too, stepped into roles I had never expected. They invited me to dinners, to brainstorming sessions, their respect for me genuine and untainted by obligation. One evening, during a small gathering, my teammate Sarah raised her glass and said, "To Eliza, who proves hard work pays off." The warmth of their support wrapped around me like a shield, reminding me that family is not always blood. Grandma Margaret remained my fiercest ally. She finalized the transfer of her estate, her properties, her investments, everything to me. One afternoon, over lunch at her favorite cafe, she slid the legal documents across the table, her eyes gleaming with pride. "You are the only one I trust," she said, her voice steady. "You have my spirit, Eliza." I hugged her tightly, my throat aching with emotion. Her faith in me was worth more than any fortune, her love a foundation stronger than any marble floor or glass wall. She called often, sharing stories from her youth, her wisdom guiding me as I navigated the new responsibilities her trust had placed in my hands. Looking out at the skyline, I thought about the lessons carved deep into me. Boundaries were sacred, respect was non-negotiable. True family was not defined by the people who shared your blood but by those who lifted you up instead of tearing you down. Kayla's loyalty, my colleagues' camaraderie, Margaret's unwavering trust, these were the bonds that mattered. I had spent years chasing the approval of people who never valued me. Now, I valued myself. I turned from the window, my award glinting on the shelf, the penthouse no longer a battleground but a sanctuary. I had claimed it as mine, not just on paper but in spirit. It was filled with laughter, with purpose, with peace. I picked up my phone, sending Kayla a quick message about our next meetup. As I hit send, calm washed over me. The Carter drama was behind me. My future stretched ahead, bright and unshackled, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely free.